Hello and welcome to another episode of the devlog of Wounds of Aereal. And today I'm going to talk about the Battle Sandbox here. So this Battle Sandbox interface is an interface that's there for the entire alpha and beta phase of the project, which will be removed when the project goes live. And this is here simply because there are so many possibilities to test this game, so many cards to play, so many scrolls to play, so many artifacts, so many different character traits, so many enemies, that it's nearly impossible to test everything and every possible combination. And if we were to do that, playing the game from start to finish every single time, we would lose a lot of time, because basically a lot of it would be randomized. And the chance that you would get some situation of a certain card in situation with a certain character in situation with a certain enemy, for example, will be so randomized it's hard to reproduce errors if there are any. So in order to reproduce any bugs or errors and to be reproducible, what we actually have here is this Battle Sandbox. And there's basically 4 parts to the Battle Sandbox. The Battle Sandbox has a state definition, and the state is actually what the game state is at a certain moment. Which level are we on? How many coins do we have? How many is the start health, maximum health, the health itself, the shield, the energy, cards deal, etc. That's at this current moment of the game development while I'm recording this video. These are the options that are there, but of course these options are going to grow systematically as the time passes by. But basically you can set any number of options here. But because a lot of things might be the same for a lot of situations, I already have some definitions here. And these definitions are actually saved in JSON files here, state definitions. Where I say early game state, for example, is a good one, where I tell it in a JSON file what's the experience, what's the level, what's the coins, etc. What are the artifact slots? What are the inventory scrolls? What are the artifacts you are using? So everything here in this preset actually is set using this state definition. And we can just select that, and then we see the artifacts which are in this definition and the scrolls which are in this definition. But suppose we're not satisfied with the artifacts that are here in use, for example, we can just press Edit Artifacts. We can remove one and we can add another. We press Accept, and then we see here the purple feather has been added. We can do the same for scrolls. We can add an Energized scroll and a Protector scroll, for example. The same counts here for enemies, for characters. Sorry. These characters, these are the 6 characters in the game. And standard, they have their own abilities, 1 attack, 1 barter, 1 intelligence. But of course, during the game, you have the ability to change the character's skills. And suppose you've added 1 to the attack, for example, and you've added 1 to craft. What is the ability, or what is the repercussion here in the game? This is the way we test that, basically. The same counts here for the combat definition. We can select a combat definition here. And this combat definition, again, is something which is predefined already in these combat definitions. Random 1, random 2, etc. These settings are set here. And you can choose any of the combat definitions here. But of course you can tweak that. 1 strong, for example. Suppose that 50 is too much, we can change it to 40. And we can set strong 2 turns and fragile 1 turn, for example. And here you can say, okay, balanced means, okay, a split between attacking and a defending scroll mode. Attacking mode will actually favor the enemy attacking you. Defend will favor the enemy casting some spell, basically. And balance will split between the 2. And here, for the type, we can have random, we can have none, but you can also specify werewolf, small spider, large spider, and bird, which are the enemy types currently in the game as I'm recording this video. And the last part here is some deck definition. You can choose some deck here. And then you can adjust the deck. You can drag out Howling Wolf. You can also double click to drag these things out here. And then you can add other cards like that. For example, suppose you want to test some specific card, then you can add a lot of those cards to your deck. So chances are that this card is dealt pretty quickly to your hand to be able to test that. You can accept, and then this will be represented here in this box at the bottom. So now you've got some settings here that you will see represented in the game once you start the game. But suppose you want to save this for later. You've changed some stuff here. You want to save some health, like that, some shields, and then you're satisfied. I want to use these artifacts, these enemies, these cards, etc. Then next time you start the sandbox, you would have to do all these settings again, and that's not very handy. And that's why here at the top you can give these settings a name, test for example, and then you can say save current settings, and then it will appear here in this this box. And you can just for example, combustion does have a lot of combustion cards in it, and I used it to test the combustion card. Electricity I used to test the electricity card, stuff like that. And then I can just start the game, and then it will use the parameters on the sandbox screen, and here we see already 2 electricity cards being dealt. So that's how it works. Now let's see. If we look at the event sheet here, what happens, we load on the start of layout, of course, we load some settings, we load the configuration, and actually what we do is we take all of the generic inputs here. So all of these here are generic inputs. You see here, generic input. It would be terribly unfeasible to have an object type for every one of these boxes here, because at this time of the recording of the video, there are like I don't know, like 20 or 30 of these boxes here, but they will grow exponentially. So in order not to have so many object types here in my project, I created something called a generic input. And instead of using this object type to interact with the generic input, I pick the generic input using an input type instance variable. And the way this happens is we just pick the generic input based on that input type, and then we do something with that generic input. So that's basically how this works. And we set it actually to all of the variables that are currently in this game. The same happens here for the current combat definitions. These input types here are set to the combat definitions of the enemies. We set the hero avatar. We can, with the controls, we can start, this is the controls for adding and removing scrolls, for example. These are the controls to go to the card management and the artifact management. Those are entirely two different layouts, which I'll cover more in another video. But you can just go there in a management code called Sandbox, and then this card management layout will behave differently, as opposed to just managing the cards in game, for example, because there are more restrictions than in this sandbox mode. So basically that's the same layout but in different modes. So this is the controls. There are inputs, and whenever an input of a generic input changes, we see what kind of input it is, and then we set the variable accordingly. And then there are lists. When the selection of a hero changes, basically we pick all of the generic inputs that are valuable for that value. That contain a value for that hero, and then we go to the hero the list hero definitions here to get the selected text of that drop-down, and that is then the name of the hero definition, and for that hero definition we get the value attack, defense, intelligence, and stuff like that. The same for the deck definitions. There can be a number of deck definitions in this JSON file, which is loaded into memory using the Ajax component here. And then we loop through it and we put the selections here to the deck content text. Then the on selection change of the list combat definitions. This list combat definitions will change the type of the enemies, the health of the enemies, the shield of the enemies, strategy, strong, fragile. And at the end of the write, they will also change the create combat definition, which is a function that changes this current combat definition JSON file, which is used at the start of the battle to read what kind of enemies need to be spawned, actually, basically. So it will loop 4 times and it will take the input types of the generic input based on a variable of the loop index here in this repeat 4 times. So basically that happens. All of these things are done so either on start of layout, where everything is loaded into the settings. Now the last thing I want to show you is these buttons here that will load and save a game. So we have this button, artifacts. Here when we click a button, ID saved, what we do is we check the generic input of that input type as the settings name, which is basically this here. This is the settings name. And then we check if it's filled in, and what we do then is we add it to the list, and we also save an item, Sandbox save list. We save this list to as a JSON file, but we also do a save game of that generic input text. So that means that whenever you type something here and you click this button, this list is going to be appended, and the content of this list is going to be saved to a different JSON file. And that only contains the names of the things that are in here. But the second thing it does, it will save the current entire game, so with all of the settings, with all of the data in the different JSON files, arrays, etc. It will save all of that to a save game. And whenever we double click something here, whenever we double click a name of that save game, the save game will be loaded. So that's actually what happens. So on double click, we load that save game. And here, whenever we press that save button, what we do is we extend the save list, we save the save list, and we save the game as a game state. So you can have as many as you want. You can also remove that here. You can remove it from the list, so it's no longer selectable if you were to have too many of those save games, actually. So basically that's how it works. You can save all of these settings in the save game. So you might see that as the game progresses and you have new versions of the project, that, for example, you save a game with the settings as they are now, and in the next version of the project there will be extra boxes, like an extra state of an enemy, for example, or an extra value of a variable that can be changed here. It could be that if you double click, then it will lose these boxes, and that's just because these boxes were not present in the game at the moment you saved the game state. So if you want to adjust some settings there, you will have to recreate those settings, because of course this game state also saves not only the variables in the background and not only the data in the JSON files and the arrays in the background, but it also saved this screen, the buttons on the screen and the input types here in the screen. So that means that you will save that along with it, and the things that are then standard in the game will not appear. So that's just the way it works. I haven't invested a lot of time yet in this sandbox because eventually it's going to be disappearing in the released game, and it's just something that helps me debug the game, and that can also help you in running the game whenever you want to and playing it however you want to. So that's how the details of the sandbox work. As always, please like and please subscribe, and if you want the full source code of this game, be sure to support me on my Patreon page. The links are in the description.